Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, January 5th, 2024. Time for another show. No leaf blowers going today. I guess they finished their work yesterday. I don't know. They may decide to come back at some point just to annoy me. Hey, who knows what the future may hold. As a matter of fact, big story that made it to the news yesterday after, 7 years too late here. As it turns out, I mean, I didn't put the story aside because I was like, well, yeah, duh, of course. But there was a report released by the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, and I guess without their compatriots, if they are patriots at all, on the other side of the aisle. I guess they had to do all this investigating themselves. But guess what? They've decided that while President Donald Trump repeatedly violated the emoluments clause of the Constitution. And just like the possibility of the leaf blowers coming back, how about the possibility of Armando coming back? Except this time he would be a welcome intrusion on the show as opposed to this annoying thing. But I'm really literally worried that they're just going to start those leaf blowers again. I don't know. That really freaked me out yesterday for some reason. But what won't freak me out is being able to welcome Armando back to the air, too. He should be here to collect accolades on having correctly identified. I mean, you know what? He'll decline to accept them. I mean, if you want to throw him his way, that's fine. But he'll say, it was obvious to anyone who had even one eye open, I think. But he did such a great job in explaining how ludicrous it was that it was going on right before our eyes. And yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this report. Like, I'm glad they finally put it down in words and gotten some attention for this. And I guess maybe it's fortuitous timing given that, or maybe it's not that fortuitous after all, but given that Republicans are insisting we're going to impeach Joe Biden for maybe sort of being related to someone who might have been paid under normal circumstances. Well, what would be normal circumstances for Washington, D.C., I suppose, but who's related to somebody who we can impeach, and so therefore something emoluments. And then here are these direct violations that they ignored with Trump. But as you know, showing them that they're hypocrites doesn't often do very much, but at the same time, the mixed feelings, as I said, is where have you been? I mean, there wasn't very much you could do about it, and but it also comes at an interesting time now that we're debating 14th Amendment applicability still for some reason, even though that also is not really a debate, but we're forced to have one anyway because reasons. But yeah, they're declaring larger and more parts of the Constitution to be dead letters every time they turn out to be applicable to Donald Trump or to Republicans. And who knows what will be left after that. Gosh, I don't know. So anyway, interesting and great opportunity to catch up with Armando on that front. I mean, that was always a real issue for him. He just was always excited and exercised about the idea that this was being blatantly violated in front of everybody. I mean, great foreshadowing of the 14th Amendment thing. Well, it's not even an insurrection. We'll just redefine it, just as we redefined emoluments. And just as the General Services Administration early on, even before the Trump presidency, foreshadowed all of this by saying, well, we're just going to redefine what it means to be a government employee. Actually, it's a better foreshadowing than we thought. Given what came out of the trial court's decision, the weird dodge on the president being an officer in the Colorado courts in the 14th Amendment case, right? First, we had the GSA saying, well, while it's true that the terms of the lease clearly forbid the old post office and pavilion, which was leased to the Trump organization and turned into the Trump Hotel, it clearly says that this lease cannot be made. We can't lease this place to a government employee. That would be a conflict of interest. It's a government-owned building, and we can't be leasing it to government employees. Then Trump leased it. Then Trump became president of the United States, and the GSA had to decide, and they did. And they came back out and said, well, for these purposes, i.e. this deal, we just want this thing to happen, and we're afraid of Donald Trump, or we're afraid to do anything or that is, bold and true to the requirements of the contract. It's going to blow the whole thing up. We worked hard to make this contract work with a guy who we never thought was going to be in government. Now he is in government. What do we do? Well, the answer is the deal's blown up. Oh no, boo-hoo, someone else will have to develop the thing. It'll be handed off to someone else. It could have been handed off to his kids, for that matter. But, I'm sure he could have structured something, but instead they just said, the rules, who cares? We'll just say he's not an employee of the United States because he's the president. He's totally different. And I guess that opened the door for dumb stuff like, he's also not an officer of the United States. Sure, why not? Anyway, well, we'll let Armando get excited about that because we got other things to get excited about here that are put away in pocket, and there are 10,000 of them, and there's a good 18 hours worth of material, and we should get to it because we're never going to finish otherwise. So many things happening here. All right, let's see. Which to lead off with, I don't know. Well, let's look at Pocket. We're on that subject. We might as well stick with it. There are two essential writers that I guess if we had the full day to donate to give over to this, and Greg were here, for instance, Greg would say, well, we can't pass this day without discussing what Adam Serwer and Jamel Bouie have got to say about the issue. And I think the issue here, we're on the 14th Amendment again. Back to that one, that other dead letter. So why not? Let's share it. Let's talk about it. And let's see if anything else can fit before we also start yelling about, why didn't we impeach him for that also? I have another story. Why didn't we do that? Why didn't we impeach him / drag him out of the White House kicking and screaming on the pandemic? There's some pandemic related news as well. Maybe you have already guessed what that might be. But first, Adam Serwer, who's afraid of calling Donald Trump an insurrectionist? I guess a lot of people are. An anti-coup provision is not much use with a loophole for self-coups. Remember them? Auto golpes. Remember when Greg used to try to teach us that term? And I think we've all given up on that one. Everyone just recognizes it a coup, and that's that. And if you're debating over what kind of pedophile somebody is based on the age group, well, you're already in trouble. So anyway, what does Adam have to say? In the history of self-defeating euphemisms, Jonathan Chait's characterization of Donald Trump's failed coup as an attempt to, quote, secure an unelected second term in office belongs in the Hall of Fame alongside George W. Bush's weapons of mass destruction related program activities or Kellyanne Conway's alternative facts. I have a new international nomination for that one. Another story that we certainly could be spending all day on, but we won't because of the nature of the program and the number of other things we have to spend time on. But let's also nominate the idea of voluntary migration from out of Gaza, which is now being floated by some of the crazier elements. And I mean, when you're talking about the crazier elements of the Israeli government, you're talking about the craziest of the crazy. I mean, just long story short there, we should all consider the Israeli government to have been thoroughly Trumpified. And if you're still, like me, wrestling with, okay, well, how do we express a continuing interest in the safety and security of the Israeli population at large versus the Israeli government, you just need to imagine what would you tell people if you were in exile from the United States during a second, third, fourth, fifth Trump administration, and if you actually desired to reclaim your place and home as an American, and you were asked, but how can you possibly support the United States? Look at what it's doing. Well, the answer is, I support the place and the people, and the government is a horror show and we need to be rid of them. I mean, that distinction has been made in the past. Doesn't help anybody make it through the day when they're on the verge of starvation or being hunted down, of course. So not much comfort there. But I don't know. Somehow my mind went to that because I have another important piece that I won't probably be able to include today. But certainly everybody's talking about that because as the article that I'm thinking of alludes to, the quiet part is being said out loud, except that it's being said by people who have always been very loud about this part. Anyway, back to our own horrific brush with authoritarianism. Alternative facts clearly meant lies. Weapons of mass destruction related program activities merely reinforced the absence of the very weapons of mass destruction that the U.S. had invoked to justify invading Iraq. Good backgrounder, of course. And another way of saying secure an unelected second term in office is coup. Yes, that does ring a bell. All right, I have to switch over to the pocket version on this one in order to continue. When writing that line, Chait, like many other liberal writers, was alarmed by the Colorado Supreme Court's decision disqualifying Trump from the ballot based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which, as you know, bars from political office those who have sworn an oath to the Constitution and subsequently engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Although Chait curiously insisted that he wouldn't comment on the legal merits of the case, he managed to somehow zero in on one of the main legal points at issue, which is whether Trump's behavior constitutes insurrection. Among the definitions explored by the Colorado Supreme Court is one from an 1860 dictionary that describes insurrection as a rising against civil or political authority, the open and active opposition of a number of persons to the execution of a law in a city or state. The A Law Review article by the conservative law professors William Baud and Michael Paulson, which the Colorado Supreme Court cited heavily, noted that insurrection involves an affirmative contest with and active resistance to the authority of the government. It is, in that sense, more than just organized resistance to the laws, more than just a protest, even one involving civil disobedience. There are many compelling political reasons not to disqualify Trump under the 14th Amendment. Among them, the potential implications of removing the immense decision of who gets to be president from the electorate's control, if it was ever in their control. But to oppose his removal on legal, not political grounds, is to, in a circuitous way, make the same argument as Trump himself, that he is above the law, that the constraints of the Constitution apply to others, but for some reason not to him. Beyond that, in service to their argument against disqualification, some of those opposed to Trump are now echoing his sycophants in arguing that January 6th was not as serious as remembered, and therefore does not fit the definition of insurrection or rebellion. Its anniversary arrives tomorrow, of course, today being the 5th. And Republicans, by the way, set to celebrate in many cases. I mean, it was a short road from, oh my God, it's an insurrection, help me. Well, I guess these people care more about the election than you do, Kevin, too. Hooray for January 6th. Anyway, so somehow January 6th was not as serious as remembered, therefore doesn't fit the definition as set out in the Constitution, and so the law should be ignored. I understand and sympathize with the instinct that this contest should be left to the electorate, but like George Conway, the more I read from the critics of the Colorado decision, the more persuasive the decision becomes. Chait himself settles on a very curious definition of insurrection. In Chait's view, the weak point in this argument is the finding that Trump's behavior constitutes insurrection. This is a defensible shorthand for January 6th, one I've frequently used myself, but it's not the most precise term because Trump was not trying to seize and hold the Capitol, nor declare a breakaway republic. That's Chait's view. Only die-hard Trumpists did not see January 6th as an insurrection in the immediate aftermath. That February, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said unequivocally that we all were here, we saw what happened. It was a violent insurrection for the purpose of trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after a legitimately certified election from one administration to the next. The retreat from this sort of language among more sincere Trump critics is a recent political necessity demanded by the 14th Amendment disqualification becoming a live issue. It is Chait's logic that is weak, defining insurrection in such a way that it precludes someone trying to seize power from a position of authority absent an explicit declaration of secession. It makes little sense for a provision intended to prevent people who attempted to seize power by force or threat of force from being elected to exclude those who engaged in insurrection while in office. But that is essentially what Chait is arguing. An anti-coup provision is not much use with a loophole for self-coups. Another major problem with Chait's argument is that it excludes most events historically referred to as insurrections, and that's kind of problematic. The Whiskey Rebellion of 1791, sometimes called, by the way, the Whiskey Insurrection, in case you were wondering, well, why is it? It wouldn't help very much. Remember that, of course, the 14th Amendment bars people involved in insurrection or rebellion, and I guess you could try and parse between the two, but anyway, yeah, the Whiskey Rebellion is how I know it, but yeah, Whiskey Insurrection is another name for it, but it certainly defines what was going on. I don't know how many people remember it. I mean, I do, but I just remember historical facts that way. They stick with me, but they're definitely taught in high school because I remember them. I remember where I heard about them. So you did too. You just might have forgotten about it. Anyway, or you're Canadian. That's possible. Or something else for that matter. But you know what? There's a pretty good chance that if you're Canadian, you did hear about it and you remembered it. No real reason for it, but they taught it to you and you're like, oh yeah, that definitely happened nearby. There's this large country to our south we should know something about, even if they refuse to know anything about us. Okay, so the Whiskey Rebellion of 1791, a revolt against an excise tax on spirits that had impoverished grain farmers in western Pennsylvania, never introduced ordinances of secession or sought to seize and hold the capital. Neither did the subsequent tax revolt known as Freese's Rebellion. Is that right? F-R-I-E-S? Freese's? That one I'm not as familiar with, although Shays' Rebellion always comes up in my mind, but that's because Chris Shays was such a traitor. Well, okay, it wasn't Chris Shays. Anyway, neither Nat Turner's uprising nor Gabriel's rebellion, uprisings against slavery, would fit Chait's narrow definition. But, naturally, I'm sure all the conservative types of the day who, if they were transported into the future, would have regarded Trump's uprising as not insurrection once it was clear that the 14th Amendment might be applicable, would have lost their minds had you somehow disagreed that the slave uprising was not a rebellion or insurrection. The same is true of John Brown's attempt to seize the arsenal at Harper's Ferry, to arm the enslaved, to rise up against their enslavers, and yet all were contemporaneously referred to as rebellions and insurrections. Despite not fitting Chait's stupid definition. That definition of insurrection is single-serve, meant solely to exclude Trump's actions. That's right on the nose there. That is likely why it appealed to the New York Times columnist Ross Douthat, who gushed that Chait's definition of insurrection, which excludes most insurrections, was obviously crashingly correct. Crashing is perhaps an apt metaphor here, but more like the kind that raises your insurance rates. Deploying a strained analogy in which Hillary Clinton, quote, tried to induce Congress to overturn the result of the 2016 race and had a left-wing protest on her behalf turned into a certification-disrupting riot, Douthat concludes that, quote, almost none of the people currently insisting that we need to take the challenge to Trump's ballot access very seriously would be saying the same thing about a challenge to her eligibility. Well, Douthat may have a hazy memory about the events leading up to and occurring on January 6th because he had announced prior to the assault on the Capitol that our weak, ranting, infected by COVID chief executive is not plotting a coup because a term like plotting implies capabilities that he conspicuously lacks. Like Chait, Douthat subscribed to the broadly shared definition of what a coup is: unlawful seizing of power by fraud, force, or threat of force, right up until the moment when courts began to consider whether Trump's actions might disqualify him under the Constitution. So it's worth reviewing what Trump actually did. The mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6th was the culmination of a series of efforts to overturn the election results, which included not merely legal appeals or extreme rhetoric, both of which are constitutionally permitted, but the use of the authority of the presidency to pressure state legislators to unlawfully overturn the elections in their state, to coerce the Department of Justice to provide a false pretext for overturning said results, and to intimidate then Vice President Mike Pence into using his authority, or rather using authority he did not have, to do the same, a request he nearly tried to fulfill. The failure of all these schemes rested not on a lack of intent, but on not having consolidated federal power in a way Trump and his advisors are openly planning to do in a second term, should he prevail in November. Although turning the mob on the Capitol may have appeared impulsive, we now know from Trump's unpublished tweet drafts and emails from the campaign itself that using the mob to coerce Congress into overturning the results was a premeditated act. He publicly encouraged the mob on Twitter as the Capitol was being breached, while refusing to use his authority to assist the overwhelmed Capitol Police because he hoped the mob would achieve its objective of keeping him in power. Had he succeeded in securing an unelected second term, as Chait would call it, it would have been the end of constitutional government in the United States. In comparison, many prior insurrections had far more limited aims and consequences. Doubthat may have forgotten these other elements of January 6th when he constructed his Clinton analogy, or he may have been unable to be more thorough given the spatial constraints of a physical newspaper, but those insisting that Trump's conduct does not fit the definition of insurrection should describe what actually happened and what Trump actually did. If they're going to argue that Trump's actions do not amount to insurrection and are therefore not disqualifying, they should use a definition that does not exclude most insurrections in American history. I mean, I think they can do it. They'll just say the things that you think happened on January 6th didn't happen on January 6th. Well, no, you're wrong about that. Well, no, I'm not. And that's how the discussion will go. But anyway, there is no need for hypotheticals with the partisan valences reversed. The one recent example we have of the Supreme Court intervening in a presidential election ended with the Democrat conceding and telling his supporters to accept the result. The argument that defeating Trump at the ballot box is politically preferable to disqualifying him is one I agree with. Or I don't. But there is something naive to assuming that Trump would accept such a verdict, and this is the real point, that he would accept such a verdict from the electorate the second time when he didn't accept it the first time, and by the way, didn't say he would accept it in 2016 either until he won, or was told that some undemocratic principle enshrined in the Constitution was going to make him win anyway. Neither a close election nor a sound defeat matters when Trump can induce his supporters to believe any fiction he conjures. If the Constitution's provisions apply only when they are popular, then the Constitution is meaningless, and I would also argue in many cases useless. I've been telling you for a couple of weeks now, the Constitution is where we enshrine things that need to be effective even when they are not popular, i.e. would be defeated in a nationwide referendum or be otherwise undemocratic if you put the question to people. But if the argument is that the law should not apply to Trump because of his substantial political support, then that would render him immune to any legal proceeding, criminal or civil, which is just as he would have it. So, forcefully argued, nothing brand new to all of this, but just well put. And to that we'll add the latest from Jamel Bowie, who asks, though we'll be interrupted by a break here, if Trump is not an insurrectionist, what is he? Well, it's a good question. I have a lot of answers for that one, but we'll see what Jamel offers to us instead of freelancing it here. Last month, of course, the states of Colorado and Maine moved to disqualify Trump as a candidate from the election, citing Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And in response, Trump has asked the Supreme Court to intervene on his behalf in the Colorado case, and he has appealed Maine's decision. There is a real question of whether this attempt to protect American democracy by removing a would-be authoritarian from the ballot is a threat to American democracy? Will proponents and supporters of the 14th Amendment option effectively destroy the village in order to save it? It may seem obvious, but we should remember that Trump is not an ordinary political figure, and try as some commentators might, there is no amount of smoke that one could create through strained counterfactuals, dire warnings of slippery slope, or outright dismissal of the events that make the Trump of 2024 a very different figure than the Trump of 2020, that can obscure or occlude this basic fact. In 2020, President Trump went to the voting public of the United States and asked for another 4 years in office. Okay. By a margin of 51% to 47%, you see, the voting public of the United States said no. More important, Trump lost the Electoral College. Yes, even that one refuge that he had, and that saved his bacon, so to speak, in the last go-around, or the first go-around, I suppose. Just rushing here to make sure that all of the alarms are properly triggered, so we can take our break here. And I realized that they were not. But again, in 2020, President Trump went to the voting public, asked for another 4 years in office. They said no, 51 to 47. And more important, Trump lost the Electoral College 306 to 232. I mean, that's fairly convincing, meaning there were not enough of those voters in just the right states to deny him, or there were enough voters to deny him a second term. I know it was close. The people decided, you see, and Trump said, in so many words, that he didn't care. What followed, according to the final report of the House Select Committee on January 6th, was an effort to overturn the results of the election. Trump, the committee wrote, unlawfully pressured state officials and legislators to change the results of the election in their states. He oversaw an effort to obtain and transmit false electoral certificates to Congress and the National Archives.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, I got tongue-tied, frustrated, and angry. Can you believe it? In reading about the insurrection, just at the end there, and kind of got myself tied up in the break. But yes, I can't stress enough how incredible it is to me still that they sent fake electoral certificates. That's still like the most astonishing part to me. And the idea of just intercepting or replacing the real ones with the fake ones, and then just saying, I don't know, the news said that he won Michigan, but this paper says he didn't. So I guess that's it. That's pretty amazing. I mean, it's in a way, it's a real vindication of everything we've been telling you on the show for all this time, right? That, if you're just willing to say anything, there's not very much that the structure of the Constitution and the rule of law can do to save you. Well, it says here that the president can only serve 2 terms. Well, either one, there's one method. I'm not the president. I'm just here executing his office. That's all. that you could try that. Like, that's crazy, but you could say it. And if you got five, we keep insisting, if 5 robed idiots will say, yeah, we'll buy that, then that's it. That's the system we've got. I mean, it might not be a great idea, might not be a good system. It was nobody's idea of how it was going to work when they framed it, but you can do that stuff if you're willing to credit people who are, acting in bad faith. And sometimes the Supreme Court, I guess, could be. Then there's also, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway, throw me out. I am violating this law. I admit it. What are you going to do about it? There's also that, and they also tried that version. We're telling you that the election was won by Joe Biden and we're about to certify that. Oh yeah? We'll murder you rather than let you certify it. Well, that doesn't matter. There's other copies or elsewhere, and just new people will come in and certify it because that's the truth. Well, we'll lay siege to their capitals too. Well, all right. That's a thing you can do. It's supposed to be against the law and outside the bounds, and it was contemplated as such when it was drafted. But yeah, people do that. I mean, we did do that, right? The King of England said these colonies are mine, and we said no, they aren't, and we'll kill you if you come here and try to take them. Oh, all right. Well, these things do happen. But we were trying to set that up for ourselves here. And then, well, we almost lost control of it. But that's what was actually going on. And by the way, I guess before I'll allow myself one more indulgence before I continue on. Something I shared with Scott yesterday that I didn't actually get to mention, but I pointed to, I thought it was the example that I had grabbed where someone had illustrated the claim that Trump was making in his petition for cert to the Supreme Court for a review of the Colorado case, the Colorado Supreme Court's decision that was, attacking the premise that, oh shoot, now I can't even remember which premise I thought it was, but it was a different one that he was attacking, as it turns out. But, Yeah. Actually, the more sensible of the two totally crazy ideas. Oh, yes, right. That, it was a violation of Trump's, or the Republican parties, members of the Republican Party in various states, in Colorado in particular, were being violated their First Amendment rights of free association. For the Supreme Court to say that Trump couldn't be on the ballot in Colorado meant that Republicans in that state who preferred Donald Trump be nominated by the Republican Party were being denied their free association rights under the First Amendment. Which, I mean, they are, but like everyone we put in prison is denied their free association rights with the rest of society. We sometimes do deprive people of those rights when they've violated the law. So, it's not like it's a new concept or anything. But as it turns out, the thing I was pointing to was even crazier, and I forgot to mention what it was. And I had been relying on I had been relying on Hayes Brown and his declaration on social media about something even crazier. But I made the same. I used that as a springboard to bring back that my favorite half serious argument about parsing the Constitution the way Trump does by saying, well, all of his pardons are invalid because he was impeached, right? Just that weird reading of the Constitution that says, well, president can issue pardons and grant reprieves for offenses against the United States except in cases of impeachment, which is, I think, fairly obviously supposed to mean you can't pardon someone of their impeachment. But I don't know. Let's just read it the other way, right? How stupid is that? Well, it's pretty stupid, but how stupid is it in light of the fact of what Hayes is in fact highlighting here? He's writing, my jaw dropped at the audacity of this parsing from Trump's SCOTUS filing trying to get the Colorado State Supreme Court decision thrown out. And I thought, oh, that's the provision I was thinking of, the First Amendment one. No, it was a dumber one. And here's a screenshot of that extremely dumb one. And it reads, that Section 3 cannot be used to deny President Trump access to the ballot. Why not? Ready for this one? Section 3 of the 14th Amendment prohibits individuals only from holding office. What does that mean? Well, here's a quote from the 14th Amendment. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold, these are their emphasis in italics, hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, etc., etc. Here's the argument. The Constitution's 14th Amendment, Section 3, is the source of this, of course. The emphasis is added. It does not prevent anyone from running for office or from being elected to office, because Congress can remove a Section 3 disqualification at any time. And Congress can remove that disability after a candidate is elected, but before his term begins. This basis alone, and of course that's a reference to, that does say in the 14th Amendment that Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, this basis alone merits reversal of the Colorado Supreme Court, he argues, and by prohibiting the states from using the ballot access restrictions to enforce Section 3, reversal would ensure that Congress retains its authority under Section 3. That's the argument. Yes, it says no person shall be a senator or representative or hold any office, but I wouldn't be a senator or representative at all, and I wouldn't hold any office simply by running for it. Well, I guess that's true, but I mean, it's also the case, again, that lots of people are disqualified by their age. I mean, but I guess it's an interesting argument. It's not altogether outrageous and horrific now that I'm looking at it. I got to admit, the idea that if the disqualification for being too young was removable by a vote of Congress, you might be able to make the same argument. Well, if people elect a 15-year-old and the Congress says it's okay with them, then it's okay with them. But by the same token, I guess we could say, look, if people elect a 15-year-old and no one objects, then I guess we just go ahead. Right? I mean, I guess. Well, what other procedure is there? You could say it's self-executing, I suppose, and the Chief Justice could refuse to administer the oath, I suppose. But yeah, other than that, like supposing that he says, to hell with it, let's administer the oath. Do we just say it's not valid, or do we just pretend? But that's pretty interesting. If that kind of parsing is available to Trump, then certainly my kind of parsing ought to be considered as well. Nothing is too dumb to consider at this stage of the game. Okay, back to Jamel Bowie, who has written something that's not dumb and worth considering. Where were we? We were just reminded that that the January 6th committee told us of all the various violations, and that it was, in fact, an effort to overturn the results of the election, that Trump had unlawfully pressured state officials and legislators to change the results of the election in their states. Everything from, I need you to call a special session and cancel your electoral votes and reclaim them and cast them in my favor because fraud, and I'll find the fraud later, to calling Brad Raffensperger and saying, I just need you to find 11,870 votes so that you can pretend I got more votes in Georgia and let me win that way. And then we'll convince the Georgia legislature to do the rest. And then when none of that worked, he just said, well, to hell with it. We'll just send fake electoral certificates to the Congress and then instruct a mob to march on the Capitol and tell people, I know these electoral votes are fake, but if you don't vote to accept them, maybe we'll murder you. And then see what the outcome is. Well, if people change their minds, especially if I say, wink, wink, not really going to murder you. We're going to freedom peacefully your face off. And you're supposed to understand from that and the gallows that's outside, that will kill you. But I never said it. Then not only will you reverse your votes, but I can't be convicted of anything because I saw on TV, if I never say I wanted to murder you, I can't be convicted of wanting to murder you, even though that's not necessarily true either. But in the face of this violence, to continue with Jamel's article, Trump refused repeated requests over a multiple-hour period that he instruct his violent supporters to disperse and leave the Capitol, and instead watch the violent attack unfold on television. That's a quote from the report, of course. He did not deploy the National Guard, nor did he instruct any federal law enforcement agency to assist. Trump sought and actively tried to subvert constitutional government and overturn the results of a presidential election. And when he could not do that through the arcane rules and procedures of the Electoral College, he tried to do it through the threat of brute force, carried out by an actual mob. Looked at this way, like, if you just squint hard enough at the armed mob outside the Capitol, the case for disqualifying Trump through the 14th Amendment is straightforward. Section 3 states that no person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. As the legal scholar Mark A. Graber writes in an amicus brief submitted to the Colorado Supreme Court, American jurists understood an insurrection against the United States to be an attempt by two or more persons, for public reasons to obstruct by force or intimidation the implementation of federal law. There was also a legal consensus at the time of the amendment's drafting and ratification that an individual engaged in insurrection whenever they knowingly incited, assisted, or otherwise participated in an insurrection. We also know that the framers of the 14th Amendment did not aim or intend to exclude the President of the United States from its terms. How do we know this? Well, let's ask him. In 1870, the Republican-controlled Senate refused to seat Zebulon Vance, the former Confederate governor of North Carolina. It strains credulity to think that those same Republicans would have sat silent if the Democratic Party had, in 1872, nominated a former Confederate leader for the presidency. But does it? Does it really? Under a plain reading of Section 3, and given the evidence uncovered by the January 6th committee, Trump cannot stand for the presidency or any other of the United States, or any other federal office, by the way, if it is one, for that matter. The real issue with disqualifying Trump is less constitutional than political. Disqualification, goes the argument, would bring American democracy to the breaking point. In this line of thinking, to deny Americans their choice of presidential candidate would destroy any remaining confidence in the American political system. It would also invite Trump's allies in the Republican Party to do the same to Democrats, weaponizing Section 3 and disqualifying candidates for any number of reasons. Disqualification would also give far more power to the courts, when the only appropriate venue for the question of Trump is the voting booth. That's the argument. But these objections rest on a poor foundation. They treat Trump as an ordinary candidate and January 6th as a variation on ordinary politics, or tourism, for instance. But as the House Select Committee established, January 6th and the events leading up to it were nothing of the sort. And while many Americans still contest the meaning of the attack on the Capitol, what is the meaning of this feces smeared on the wall, one might ask? Many Americans still contest the meaning of the attack on the Capitol. Many Americans also contested, in the wake of the Civil War, the meaning of secession and rebellion. That those Americans viewed Confederate military and political leaders as heroes did not somehow delegitimize the Republican efforts to keep them, as much as possible, out of formal political life. What unites Trump with the former secessionists under the disqualification clause is that, like them, he refused to listen to the voice of the voting public. He rejected the bedrock principle of democratic life, the peaceful transfer of power. The unspoken assumption behind the idea that Trump should be allowed on the ballot and that the public should have the chance to choose for or against him yet again is that he will respect the voice of the electorate. But we know this isn't true. It wasn't true after the 2016 presidential election, when, after winning the Electoral College, he sought to delegitimize the popular vote victory of his opponent as fraud. And it was put into stark relief after the 2020 presidential election. Trump is not simply a candidate who does not believe in the norms, values, and institutions we call American democracy, although that is troubling enough. Trump is all that, and a former president who used the power of his office to try to overturn constitutional government of the United States. Is it anti-democratic to disqualify Trump for office and deny him a place on the ballot? Does it violate the spirit of democratic life to deny voters the choice of a one-time office holder who tried, under threat of violence, to deny them their right to choose? Does it threaten the constitutional order to use the clear text of the Constitution to hold a former constitutional officer accountable for his efforts to overturn that order? We've often joked in the past on the show, everywhere. You've joked elsewhere. Everybody makes this joke eventually, I think, if you think about these things. The idea of just declaring the Constitution unconstitutional. I mean, there's a million reasons why people think they might one day try to do something like that. Because, again, 5 black robes can do whatever they want. But ordinarily, it seems ridiculous on its face. But somehow, these days, not so much anymore. But the answer to all of Jamel's questions, as he offers here, is no, of course not. There is no rule that says democracies must give endless and unlimited grace to those who used the public trust to conspire for all the world to see against them. Voters are free to choose a Republican candidate for president. They are free to choose a Republican with Trump's politics. But if we take the Constitution seriously, or literally, then Trump, by dint of his own actions, should be off the board. Not that he will be. The best odds are that the Supreme Court of the United States will punt the issue of Section 3 in a way that allows Trump to run on every ballot in every state. And while it will be tempting to attribute this outcome to the ideological composition of the court, as well as the fact that Trump appointed 3 of its 9 members, I think it will, if it happens, have as much to do with the zone of exception that exists around the former president. That person in particular, I would say. If Trump has a political superpower, it's that other people believe he has political superpowers. They believe that any effort to hold him accountable will backfire. And I don't know, that describes equally his supporters and his opponents, I would say. They believe that any effort to hold him accountable will backfire. They believe that he will always ride a wave of backlash to victory. They believe that challenging him on anything other than his terms will leave him stronger than ever. Most of this is false, but to the extent that it is true, it has less to do with the missed shots, to borrow an aphorism from professional sports, than it does with the ones not taken in the first place. Okay. I mean, I couldn't help but jump out and add my own commentary to both of them, which is pretty narcissistic, really, because those 2 guys are pretty good. But, well, how else are you supposed to read their articles, right? I mean, I would imagine they would be pretty upset if if people were reading them without having their own thoughts along the way. I think they would think that they had failed in their mission. All right. Well, let's see. Still got a few minutes here to fill with some other things before we turn to the emoluments situation. And luckily you are, as longtime listeners, and I assume you're all longtime listeners, you remember very well our discussion of the emoluments clause and how it, too, was just being blatantly violated. It's a terrific parallel to what's going on now on the 14th Amendment. So that I feel comfortable, that we'll cover all of that in the second hour. And we should throw in a couple other items here before we get to the top of the hour. First, total switch in focus, except for the fact that Donald Trump, of course, is centered in all of this because he's so horrifically, outrageously garbage. I'm losing my, my vocabulary fails me at some point when it comes to Donald Trump. But something else we've harped on here on social media, in the show, other people have hit on, of course, as well, because how do you miss it? But turns out, to stick strictly to the science of it, that remember the pandemic that we had 1 million years ago and is totally over now, except that everybody is sick with COVID right now? Hydroxychloroquine. Why aren't people rushing to the stores to get it now that this new variant is out and another wave is overtaking the United States? Well, as it turns out, as we knew then, it doesn't work. It's not meant for this. It's not it's not applicable to the treatment of COVID-19. It just isn't. But in addition to it not being helpful, one, in some cases, it convinced people that there was a viable alternative to getting vaccinated and treating COVID as COVID if they managed to get it anyway. And two, hydroxychloroquine, not a particularly safe thing to take unsupervised or in forms that weren't meant for human consumption or what have you. And that was sometimes the only way people could get a hold of it once there was a run on the human tabulation, the human formulated tabs in the pharmacies. So anyway, point is that Politico Europe, and that exists, it's still out there, has, I don't know why Politico US doesn't have it. Maybe it does. It just originated in Politico Europe. Hydroxychloroquine could have caused 17,000 deaths during COVID, a study finds. Well, what do you know? Isn't it amazing? The subheader here says, by the way, former U.S. President Donald Trump said, quote, "What do you have to lose? Take it." Now, lots of people actually then joined in saying that. People led the way with that and then followed as well. 17,000 deaths around the world, or at least within the few countries that they sampled here. Not all in the United States, just in case you were wondering. Mari Eccles is the writer here. I don't know how she pronounces the M-A-R-I, that presents as possibly female gendered, but I don't know. Can't tell. And E-C-C-L-E-S as the last name. But here's the important part, I think, although the name is certainly important. Nearly 17,000 people may have died after taking hydroxychloroquine during the first wave of COVID-19, according to a study by French researchers. The anti-malaria drug, and by the way, this is COVID-19, not malaria, was prescribed to some patients hospitalized with COVID-19 during the first wave of the pandemic, despite the absence of evidence documenting its clinical benefits, the researchers point out in their paper, published in the February issue of Biomedicine and Pharmacotherapy. Pharmacotherapy. Okay. I think I got that one out correctly. Oh, and by the way, yeah, as I'm reading this, I'm realizing, oh yeah, I also conflated in my head, in the critique there, both, I conflated, hydroxychloroquine, which is a human drug, and ivermectin, which has a human application, but also has a veterinary application, et cetera, et cetera. Hydroxychloroquine, though, was also, wasn't it like used also as it did have a veterinary application, didn't it? In fish tanks, right? And then people were like drinking their fish tank treatments in order to get the hydroxychloroquine that they thought they needed. And who knows what that may have done. Plus also ivermectin similarly, caused a lot of damage to humans when they were taking it in other forms other than the human dosage. And that may have killed people as well. But yeah, I guess I need to clarify that point. But now, back to the story. Researchers have estimated that some 16,990 people, that's close to 17,000, in 6 countries, France, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Turkey, and the U.S., may have died as a result. That figure stems from a study published in the Nature Scientific Journal in 2021, which reported an 11% increase in the mortality rate linked to its prescription against COVID-19 because of the potential adverse effects like heart rhythm disorders and its use instead of other effective treatments, which I assume was at the heart of this. But yes, it did have ill effects of its own as well. Researchers from universities in Lyon, France, and Quebec, Canada, remember Canada, right? Used that figure to analyze hospitalization data for COVID in each of the 6 countries, exposure to hydroxychloroquine, and the increase in the relative risk of death linked to the drug. In fact, they say the figure may be far higher given that the study concerns only 6 countries from March to July of 2020, when the drug was prescribed much more widely, and who knows what happened after that. Hydroxychloroquine gained prominence partly due to French virologist Didier Raoult, oh, good luck with that pronunciation for me, who had headed the, the Mediterranean Infection Foundation, my goodness, hospital, but was later removed amid growing controversy. It was also considered something of a miracle cure, quote unquote, by then U.S. President Donald Trump, who said, "What do you have to lose? Take it." And of course, I think the current Surgeon General of Florida, is it Joseph Ladapo? Is that right? Also said much the same thing, and also continues in office now to say that COVID-19 vaccines are against his recommendation, believe it or not. And, well, there's been a pretty high price for that. And I once again remind you that whether they knew it or not at the time, I can't fault them too much. But in hindsight, the doctors at Walter Reed Hospital, with a catastrophic failure of the trolley problem, saving Donald Trump's life so that he could go on to promote hydroxychloroquine as a cure that ended up killing 17,000 people across 6 countries in the space of like 6 months in 2020. Although I will say all of the time frame of this research comes before Trump actually gets COVID in October. But I mean, even afterwards, even after leaving the hospital, he continues to promote various stupid ideas about so-called miracle cures, including the one that actually worked on him, which he then promised to deliver for free to every senior in America, using the armed forces to do it. And by the way, I still have people push back on it and say, well, you know, there was a program of distributing remdesivir and other, what was it, immune globulin treatments. Do I pronounce that correctly? I don't know. But we did send those things around the world. Oh, Armando is here early. Let's jump in. Hey, Armando, how you doing? Hi, we're a little early here, but hang on. We'll we'll tell everybody you're here. We're on the air still, but just about to take our top of the hour break. So hang on just a second.
Okay.
And everyone who was eagerly anticipating your call will be relieved to know you're no worries about whether or not he's going to call during the break. All the suspense is gone. But hang on, we'll just wrap up here. I was just commenting, and I guess you might be interested in this as well, just because you were a human who was alive during this period. Hydroxychloroquine, as it turns out, French study just out saying that promotion of hydroxychloroquine may have killed some 17,000 patients around the world between 6 countries, but just in the few months of 2020, actually, just sort of reviewing how the poor docs at Walter Reed failed the trolley problem so miserably when they had their chance. Get ready. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando returns to the airwaves. I felt compelled to reach out and see if by some chance he might actually be free today. And as it turns out, yes, he is. And with, well, I don't know whether it's whether we're pulling you away from something else or not. But
I just finished an hour of work, so I thought I could take some time.
Sure. Okay. Well, so emoluments, as it turns out, that's still in the Constitution, even though we decided a couple of years ago. I guess maybe it's not. I'm reading this wrong. I guess there aren't 2 emoluments clauses. They didn't put it in there twice because they weren't serious, as you know. And if they were, well, also F it and never mind. But, yeah, as it turns out, someone still thinks it's a serious thing. It's just that it's like 7 years down the road. And I don't know.
It's funny to how the story rebroke. House Democrats say charge. I saw one reporter say they charge. So what do you mean charge? It's admitted. It's not in dispute. He got the money. But of course, David, first of all, Happy New Year.
Oh yes, thank you. You too.
And I said in my tweet before I came on that I'm reliving January 2017 because from the first day, I think, we discussed it. I said, the guy can't have that hotel. Because of the contract. The contract said you can't hold office and have the hotel. But, hey, that didn't matter, apparently.
Guess not.
And then we got to the emoluments point because there was obviously going to be foreign money coming into his hotel because it's a hotel in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And we said, what's going on here? This can't happen. And then they figure, well, who has standing? Well, it turns out, other hotels have standing because they're losing business to him because the foreign countries and companies are going to bribe him unconstitutionally to get favors from him.
Yeah.
And nobody cared. You remember? Oh, well, whatever. It's like the Section 3 discussion. Yeah, it's in the Constitution, but it's not really in the Constitution.
It would be such an inconvenience, honestly. Remember, nobody thought we were going to have to enforce this because you're not supposed to take emoluments and you're not supposed to foment insurrection. Couldn't we just let this go?
Pretend. Yeah, it's just a norms thing. It's not a norms thing. It's a constitutional thing. It's in the Constitution. And look, I'm ready to read things out of the Constitution. Let's start with the Second Amendment. All right?
Sure. Right. It's very undemocratic.
It's there, but so what?
I've been thinking about that lately, right? As I read again, in the wake of another school shooting, by the way, that 60% of the American population wants some fairly serious gun control, even higher numbers if you're talking about lesser attempts at gun control. But, there's like a 60% favorability for assault weapons restrictions and maybe even a bare majority for just outright ban again. But we're not doing it because one of those stupid undemocratic parts of the Constitution is getting in the way. And, now that we're sweeping that aside, maybe that's one of them that should go. It's an amendment just like the other unconstitutional, undemocratic thing. The unconstitutional Constitution. If there's a constitution in exile, there's also an unconstitutional constitution.
Apparently so, because, again, it's just amazing to me, and how blithe everybody is about it. Well, we really shouldn't do this. It's not right. I said, wait. There's a lot of things that aren't right in the Constitution, in my opinion.
Yes.
Second Amendment,
right?
The Senate, the Electoral College. All of those things are not right. None
They're certainly
of them are democratic.
Right. But that's, it's unfortunate and true, but yeah, as I've said over the past couple of weeks, well, the thing is, the written Constitution, that's where you stash the things that need extraordinary protection in the view of the framers. They may not have been right about it. We may have changed our mind along the way, and there's a remedy for it. It's extraordinary. It's difficult, but the written Constitution, or at least the Bill of Rights, the whole thing is undemocratic stuff that they felt like they needed to protect. Free speech rights, well, democratically determined. No, there shouldn't be Nazis marching in Skokie. Well, now you can. Now they should be running for president. But back in the day, democratically speaking, all of those free speech rights would have been swept aside and overruled. But we enshrined them in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights because we thought that normal people would see these things as necessary to democracy. Now there's the unconstitutional Constitution and, of course, the undemocratic democracy that we have.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about the insurrection or don't be an insurrectionist qualification to be president, there are three in the Constitution, two in the original one, that you had to be 35 and a natural-born citizen. Yes. That was in the original.
Oh, you're an originalist.
And then the country took the extraordinary measure with the extraordinary effort of passing an amendment to the Constitution to say, well, and you can't be an insurrectionist and be president either.
Right.
But somehow, I guess it doesn't matter.
Americans fought and died for that.
There's a different amendment we could ignore, the one that limits the president to 2 terms.
Right,
we could replace Biden with Obama.
Sure. Why not?
Why not? That's undemocratic, isn't it?
Yeah, you let the people decide whether this thing says this or not.
It's almost bizarre.
It is.
That people make these arguments.
And I love the parsing. In a terrible way, the evil genius of some of the parsing. Just before I also read, did you see this one? One of the arguments about the Colorado case, but that Trump's argument was, well, it says the constitutional amendment here says that no person shall be senator or representative or hold any office. And as a candidate, I'm not doing those things. So put me on the ballot.
Beyond being ridiculous, then it says, well, you know what? I could be elected president if I was 18 and not a natural-born citizen. I can be elected. I can't hold the office, but I can be elected.
Right.
It's absurd.
So let me do it. You know, yeah. And now,
what was all the fuss about where Obama was born? He could run.
Yeah. They can the other hitch, I guess, to it was, in the 14th Amendment, there is at least this mechanism whereby Congress I could win and then ask them to remove the disability. Now they might not, in which case, I don't know what happens. I guess the vice president becomes president.
Okay.
But I was discussing with Greg the other day and I'm like, if anything goes, right? All right. Well, rather than why screw around with all these sycophants trying to run for the vice presidency? Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy. My vice president is myself, Donald Trump. I nominate myself, the one that lives in New York.
And he lives in 2 different states,
right.
So he can do it.
Yeah, and also, by the way, to hell with that restriction.
It's. The revered Constitution and everybody. Why even be a textualist then? Who cares what the text even says if we can ignore it?
Right. Although I did like the possibility we were inventing originalists where, like you could say, well, what I'm talking about was in the original Constitution. What you're talking about was in the Bill of Rights. That's a sequel and non-canonical.
Exactly. Well, yeah, those we don't have to pay attention to.
Screw the hell out of those anyway. But
I will point one last thing out about this thing, which is that weirdly, Trump makes the argument on this Colorado cert petition that Colorado's not putting him on the ballot violates the state's right to choose the manner in which
that too
electors are chosen. That's unbelievable. That's the opposite of what he needs to be arguing. He needs to say that the federal provision trumps that provision, because if not, Colorado could just unilaterally say, well, we just don't want the guy on the Constitution. We don't want the guy on the ballot.
Yeah, you could.
Period. We've decided that he cannot win our electors. The legislature passes a law tomorrow.
That's it. Yes, I was hoping that the state legislature
everybody
would act.
except Donald Trump can be on the ballot.
Yeah, and say, I know that seems undemocratic, but as you recall, the independent state legislature theory says.
Yeah, it's the independent state legislature. But even better, I have a better scenario. The Colorado legislature holds a, quote, trial, unquote, finds that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, and that, in their opinion, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to him, sweeping away all those other arguments. And it says, the legislature dictated the manner in which his electors will be chosen. They said no insurrectionist, and we find he's an insurrectionist, therefore he's banned.
Yes. Well,
so that's the one argument he should never make, because Colorado is a state, and the state decided he can't be on the ballot.
Yeah. Now, he was unlikely to win their electors.
To do that, and there is a way to do it, in my opinion. Say, well, they applied this incorrectly, and that's a federal question. I agree that that's a federal question. The Supreme Court can say, look, I understand Colorado has this power, but you did it improperly because you created Donald Trump isn't either. It's not subject to it because he's not an office holder. He didn't hold the office of the presidency, apparently, and his oath doesn't say be loyal to the Constitution or something, because it says
the wording was different
slightly different,
but it's actually worse.
Whatever cockamamie theory they've come up with, but and the Supreme Court can do it. I'm actually, of course, they're going to overrule the Colorado Supreme Court. I'm actually curious how they're going to do it.
I mean, my guess is that they'll want to. I guess unless at some point somebody says, we're all going to be murdered by this guy. Screw him already.
Well, the funny thing is, if you're a Republican, you would be whispering in, like, if Leonard Leo was smart, he'd be telling Clarence Thomas, look, let's get him off the ballot, because you know what? That's the one guy Biden can beat.
I guess.
I mean, and I think that there's a certain truth to that. I mean, maybe Biden can beat the others. I don't know. But certainly if you look at most of the polling,
that's what
Trump
they think,
is he's his opponent.
I'm happy with them thinking that and making the switch for that reason and then having that contest.
I honestly, my view is actually the way to do it is to interpret the section, and I think this is not incorrect, but I've written it and people have yelled at me about it, but because it doesn't, textually speaking, it doesn't say you have to find a conviction. I agree that it doesn't say that, but it doesn't say also what exactly you have to find and what's the burden of proof and things like that. It
is a little ambiguous.
Section 3 is very open as to what you do. Well, who determines who was an insurrectionist or not? Right. And all that. And my view is, unlike after the Civil War, where whether you were a Confederate or not really wasn't a factually difficult issue. Everybody knew who the Confederates were. The question now is a little harder. And I personally think there should be a conviction for actions that constitute insurrection. And unlike other people, I don't think you have to prove that he led the insurrection or caused it, though I think you could, but I don't think you have to prove it. I think all you have to prove is that he tried to stop the constitutionally mandated by the 12th Amendment. Of course, we could forget about that too now these days.
Right.
But the constitutionally mandated process for the peaceful transfer of the presidency from one person to the other.
Yeah,
that's in the Constitution. There's nothing that is in the 12th Amendment that is different than what's happened. Yes, there's a few more bells and whistles in the Electoral Count Act reform, but the basic proceeding that Donald Trump conspired and did obstruct in order to frustrate the peaceful transfer of power mandated expressly by the Constitution of the United States is what he is charged with. Now, he's not charged with insurrection, but he is charged with trying to stop the process described in the 12th Amendment for the peaceful transfer of the power of the presidency. That is insurrection against the Constitution of the United States.
Well, it is.
So if he's convicted of 1512c2, which he should be, then he should be disqualified under the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That's how I would do it.
Okay.
And everybody who wants more, we can't do it that way. You can't just have the Secretary of State from Maine or the Colorado Supreme Court. Okay, fine. Let's put this criminal trial on. If he's convicted, he's disqualified. If he's innocent, he's on the ballot.
I guess.
Who couldn't? Isn't that fair? If I can't convince you after he's convicted, beyond a reasonable doubt of engaging in insurrection against the Constitution, then I'm never going to convince you, right?
Yes, and you won't, because they'll just say, well, all right, so he's guilty.
Yeah, it was a D.C. jury and Obama judge.
Oh, right. Well,
I know,
all
but
of
that's the whole point. They're always going to say something.
Yeah, and on top of that, they'll say, well, okay, even if I am guilty and the jury was totally competent for whatever reason, although I'll deny all of that, Congress can still vote by 2/3 to remove this disability, and I'll try and get them to do that. Now, why would they? You're never going to have a 2/3 majority. Well, only partisans would reject the people's choice at this point, and which, by the way, again, well, I don't know. You weren't the people's choice the first time, and you weren't the people's choice the second time, and it looks like you're even less the people's choice the third time, but the only thing that saves you is the undemocratic thing.
Right. The undemocratic electoral college. He was never won the popular vote. Never came close.
That's
what was undemocratic was Donald Trump.
Yes.
Being president because he got less votes.
Yeah. And we go around and around in the same circle. Right? That was undemocratic. Yeah. Well, there's this thing. I forgot what you guys used to say to me like 2 hours ago. Oh, yeah. Right. We're a republic, not a democracy.
Well, yeah, it's always annoying because, of course, a republic is a form of democracy.
I know, but they keep saying it. All right,
it's not an electoral college is not a requirement of a republic.
That's true. Absolutely.
France is a republic.
Yes. They say so.
And France doesn't have an electoral college.
I mean, they say so, but I mean, so does North Korea. But okay.
Well, the problem with North Korea isn't, I don't even know if they have elections, but presuming they do. The problem isn't that it's, quote, a republic, it's that the elections are rigged. But at any rate,
Iran
let me take
is
you
a
back
republic.
to why you actually asked me to come on, which was the
what was it
emoluments
again?
clause.
Right, that was it.
Right.
I knew there was something.
I mean, this hasn't been a secret that he was getting all this money, so supposedly he was turning over, at least maybe he pretended to, like he used to give his check to something every month, whatever, some stupid thing. Supposedly he was giving the profits to the Treasury or some nonsense like that. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. I mean, I think that was nonsense. And most people forgot it because he stopped reporting that he was doing it because he wasn't doing it. And also nobody cared. But yeah, there was that thing with the check.
But that still doesn't fix anything because, it's insane. But of course, he violated the emoluments clause from day one, because I'm sure there were foreign guests there the day he got inaugurated.
They have the They have the records of it now. Although some records are apparently missing for some strange reason.
Records are missing. Absolutely true. But look, even now, forget about all that. He doesn't have the hotel anymore. If you're forward thinking, and I'll be forward thinking.
All right.
He made a deal with the Saudis on this golf tournament stuff.
Yeah. Well,
you can't do that as president.
What? Why not? Is that an emolument? Oh, darn. Well, who cares? Get rid of that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. But to hell with that, and let's get rid of it. Define it out of existence, and just purge it from memory. Oh, by the way, another parallel to the discussion we've still feel like we have to have the 14th Amendment one. What ability has Congress got in all of this to, let's say, to cure the defect of the emoluments? It's clearable by Congress. They can say, you know what, to hell with it. You can keep the emoluments if by act of Congress we say you can. Now, they haven't, and that's supposed to mean nothing all of a sudden, by the way, that they haven't cleared it. I mean, it still means it's supposed to mean it's a live issue and that you should be, I guess, prosecuting him for it. But of course, you can't prosecute him for anything while he's president. Now that he's not president, you should be able to prosecute him for it. And interestingly, the courts, which said no one has standing to press this case, now that he's not president and can finally be criminally charged with violating the Constitution, they mooted the case because he's not president now. So it's not an emolument that matters.
Can you imagine 4 years? Because I think the lawsuit started almost immediately.
Yeah.
4 years.
Mm-hmm. Dithering around. And for everybody who worries about, or says, another opportunity to, what's the harm of indulging him for a short period of time? Just to, resolve the interlocutory appeals prior to the trial. Well, here's the harm. You just kick it down the can over and over and over again. And then somebody's going to moot the thing because he's not president. Well, now he's not a candidate anymore. He was defeated, or he got COVID a 15th time and died, whatever happens. And then the next person comes around. We've always been worried about the next Trumpy politician who actually has some command of facts and the leverage of government and says, there's no such thing as insurrection, for one thing, so I should just campaign militarily rather than, bother with this stuff on the ballot. If I conquer Colorado, at least I'll get their electoral votes. And you just do things that way. That's
good. That's good.
Why not?
Forget the election. Let's just have a war.
Yeah, right. We had one the first time, and by the way, the Madison Cawthorn theory of the 14th Amendment is that the Amnesty Acts in the 1870s actually legalized insurrection going forward. This was only meant to apply to the Civil War. It doesn't apply to any insurrections in the future, and we can just have another Civil War at any time. Imagine that being your interpretation of the post-Civil War amendments. The real effect of the Civil War amendments by the victorious Republicans was to legalize another war anytime you're ready. I mean, maybe they said, well, we taught you such a good lesson the first time that we're eager to teach it to you a second time. But I don't know. That's maybe one of the more absurd interpretations of things I've ever seen. But that one too got mooted because he lost his primary, and they said, to hell with it. Why settle these issues?
Yeah, and then there's the guy in New Mexico who the case ended because he screwed up his filing in court on his appeal. So
I don't think I'm aware of that one.
We don't know if you should have been disqualified, but we do know that you don't know how to file a legal paper properly. Ergo, you lose.
Well, that was easy. Okay. From now on, everybody has to screw up their legal filings, or else so, there's nothing we can do.
I am very curious to see what they do, because what can they say? Colorado has a fact-finding. We say, well, that fact-finding was wrong. Or are you going to say, well, the president really isn't an officer of the United States, even though he holds the office of the presidency of the United States?
Right,
okay,
sure.
That doesn't make much sense, but okay. If that's what you're going to go with. It's not self-executing. Oh, well, it's not self-executing because why? Well, how about Section 1, the one that says equal protection under the law? Is that self-executing or not? Because, let me tell you what happened, David. In 2000,
yes,
the Supreme Court handed George Bush the presidency supposedly because what was happening violated equal protection.
Yes, right.
But the Congress didn't pass anything, so what are you talking about? It's not self-executing.
Yeah, we didn't have a court ruling on that, and no conviction on
on whether there was an equal protection. Yeah. And Congress never acted. You got to, I'm sorry that you were wrong. That it's all nonsense. And they're going to come up with some nonsense, and everybody's begging them to come up with some nonsense. Is the worst.
So, yeah.
I said, well, I want fealty to the Constitution, except when I don't.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's just kind of the reality that we're dealing with here, and they love to define themselves out of these things. As a matter of fact, that reminded me of another issue from the emolument side of the discussion. And yeah, we should probably also consider at some point. So, okay, they have a report. Now what? I mean, I think the answer might be, they have it and they'll use it as, I don't know, opposition research in the campaign, and as though someone would care about that.
But he's not president now, so he's not violating.
So it doesn't matter.
It proves he violated it.
Yes.
Definitely.
And he'll maybe do it again. I don't know. What do you think? But it won't be through the hotel.
No, it's going to be. I do think the biggest thing is the golf tournament.
Yeah, probably
stuff.
Worth much more.
He has like 3 golf tournaments with them, which is worth a fair amount of money to him.
But it occurred to
me definitely millions
that we should have seen this whole thing coming. I think the Colorado trial judge reached the conclusion about whether or not the president is an officer for a backhanded and possibly supportable reason. Which was, I'm doing this so that I'll be reversed in a minute in the Supreme Court. But my important thing is I'm going to find that it was insurrection
I
then
got all
kick
that
it up.
Logic.
But
I didn't like it. I thought that was complete BS from the judge. And I said, you know what?
They had to do it that way.
Completely undercuts your insurrection finding, in my view, because it shows you just make up whatever you wanted. You didn't want to be the one to do it. Because, look, and I kind of see it. I don't want to be the one who's getting death threats.
I'd rather not.
But you know what? Recuse yourself. Say, you know what? I hate him so much, I don't want to take the case.
That is an interesting thought. But what I was thinking of was the whole idea of defining whether, this is an open question. Is he an officer? I mean, it's not an open question. It shouldn't be an open question, but we make it one for various reasons. But it occurs to me that we should have seen this coming, given that this happened in late 2016, when the GSA director said, the lease says you can't lease this building to a government employee.
No, it says specifically any elected
does it
office
say?
Holder.
Okay, and it also does say government employee, certainly. But okay, that's even worse.
Remember that memo so well?
Yeah.
The guy said, no, the blind trust, he put it in so it's okay.
Oh, okay. As opposed
it's not okay. He's still benefiting from it.
Yes. Well, obviously that's never supposed to be the point of this thing. Well, it doesn't say, well, you can't sign a lease with a government officer, office holder, or government employee unless they fool you into thinking, what if they put the money in a bag? Well, all right.
Yeah, we can't see the money, so it's like it doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, it's a Supreme Court of infants that don't understand object permanency. Where'd the bribe go? Peekaboo, here it is. Wow, a bribe. No, it's gone now. Oh. Bob Menendez, you should have shielded those gold bars from view.
That's actually funny because I saw there's some analysis that Menendez might get off again on legal terms, which because of the McDonald case.
Okay. I could see that. I mean, I thought that
they're saying, look, it sounds terrible what he did, but I don't know that this gets them past the McDonald hurdle, which is, I think, hilarious.
Wow.
If he gets off again because of McDonald's.
Yeah. I mean, I guess wow, what a case that one was. All right. We're going to take a 2-minute break. We can regroup. We'll figure out how much time you have left.
And I'm going to get some coffee. So
okay.
I'll be back.
Okay. Excellent. You got 2 minutes to do it, and then I have to work overtime to fill in for you if you're still putting creamer in it. Okay, see you in a minute. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
Get back.
Okay. As a matter of fact, we're all back now. So, all right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And as you hear, Armando is back. You got coffee? You actually got some?
Yeah,
all right,
I
good.
did.
Yeah, and how do you take your coffee, by the way?
I have a little bit of half and half and 2 sweetenless.
Okay. All right. Just checking in case anybody has to fetch coffee for you during
Yes,
the show.
Exactly.
Okay. Excellent. It's good to know. It's
funny,
very revealing.
The Keurig thing at the end always seems like the longest part. I don't know if you have a Keurig or not, or you make really good coffee. I'm
not a good coffee person.
Guy.
Yes, me too. But I don't have a Keurig. But still, yes, I'm even worse.
And it does
sometimes.
At the end. The last little pour takes like an hour.
To get all the last drips.
The last bit.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, I wondered whether you were going to be like Cuban purist cafecito.
I am sometimes,
kind of...
but sometimes a quickie.
Okay. Understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have in front of me also, I just happened to have open, I was looking around for the news reports, and I have, what's in front of me here? Courthouse News Service. I was just sort of grabbed by their headline, which I think probably has it right, unfortunately, even though it is a big deal, but House Democrats break little new ground with Trump emoluments report, experts say. Okay. I mean... Yeah, true, in the sense that we all knew, well, I mean, what new ground is there to break? Trump takes bribes. I know. The guy who was just until recently Speaker of the House knew. And he knew even then where the bribes were coming from. And even this report doesn't allege that he was taking bribes from Putin. But, everybody knew. In other words, everybody in America, everyone around the world knew that Donald Trump was the guy most likely to, if he were handed the presidency, take bribes in the middle of it. So yes, Good. It's documented. But again, everybody knew. Everybody knew what they were using.
What's the point of the House Democrats report? And I
guess that's
it got the traction it did, to be honest with you, because it really didn't break new ground. We all knew, but I'm glad it did.
Yes.
At least for a day, grab people. But the positioning was a juxtaposition against Comer's complete nonsense with the Burisma.
Yes. And Hunter
crap.
Biden and
there literally is no report that you can do that Joe Biden got any money. What does Comer do? He goes, well, Joe Biden lent Hunter Biden money, and Hunter Biden got money. So when Hunter Biden paid back the money his father loaned him, it was a foreign bribe. So the bribe netted Joe Biden zero.
Right. Good bribe.
I mean, he needs to take lessons from Menendez to learn how to accept a bribe. I mean, this is crazy.
I mean,
but people say that with a straight face, and it gets reported as if it's a credible thing to say. It's insane. Instead of he doesn't go on when he does. Sometimes I guess he gets a little heat, but if he ever goes on a non-Fox station, say, what are you talking about? How did Joe Biden make money at this?
Yeah, I don't know what the answer. The point is he stood to lose all that money by making a bad loan to his son, then he didn't.
He could have avoided standing to lose any money by not giving the money.
I guess that's possible. Well, he should have done that. He should have been fiscally responsible.
He shouldn't have helped his son out.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
throw him out. Right. Yes. Family values. Kick your son out. I guess. There is nothing.
Yeah, right. So you juxtapose that and said, okay, well, look at this. There's a quote unquote impeachment inquiry going on.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Over basically nothing because they have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always someone who said, the reality is Joe Biden probably shouldn't have been the point person on Ukraine just because of the appearances. He didn't do anything. I mean, he was given the policy.
He was vice president.
Nothing was changed. He went and he carried out the policy. So
yes,
I
guess the only thing he could have done at that point differently was say, well, I know I'm being handed this policy, and there's a good reason to give the vice president of the United States this job. But as it happens, my son does some business in this country.
Yeah, maybe someone else should handle this. I mean, in hindsight,
Secretary of State.
They didn't get it. Plus, he wasn't going to run, so they didn't think about it that much.
I just solved everything, right? Well, shouldn't the Secretary of State be doing this? Hillary Clinton? Are you serious?
Yeah, exactly. But then the funny part is, of course, the loan stuff, and the so-called tough talk to that Chinese businessman with the WhatsApp, whatever. It was in 2017.
Okay.
Joe Biden wasn't vice president anymore.
No, as it turns out, that opportunity was denied. He didn't run, but he wasn't even a candidate. But he should have been. Colorado should have declared him the president, even though Hillary Clinton was nominated. You see, independent state legislatures should have done it.
So what is it? That's what Raskin and those guys are doing. They say, okay, let me remind you guys of something.
Yes, and I think
Donald
that becomes
Trump
obvious.
got $8 million from foreign companies when he was president.
Right.
That we know of.
If you care about such things, which you don't.
You pretend to care. You want to have an impeachment inquiry. Listen, it's like, they're investigating Hunter Biden, but we also know that Jared Kushner got $2 billion to manage, which, of course, doesn't mean $2 billion in his pocket. I understand that, but it means millions and millions of dollars in his pocket from Saudi Arabia.
Certainly means plenty of buying power.
Middle East policy for Donald Trump, supposedly.
Yes, a huge success, by the way.
But you see what I'm saying? I said, oh, wait a second.
Right.
You can't be serious about this nonsense. But, of course, you can, because how does it work? Because Fox will do whatever Fox does. We know that. They lie, they cheat. I don't know if you've seen the latest iteration of Nate Silver, right?
Sort of.
Nate Silver's gotten crazy. So he's like oh, all of you journalists are just shaping your reporting because you want it to be for the guys you think are the good guys. It's like, wait a second. I don't even think that's true, but if you think it's true, why are you just calling those out? Why don't you talk about Fox? Now, my theory,
okay,
and I've said it publicly, is he is angling to see if Fox will hire him.
Oh.
Because I think that the loss of the 538 thing when the ABC fired him really put a real hole in his income. And I know he likes to play poker, but, poker is you're good. You can make a lot of money, but you can go on some losing streaks and not make any money for a while. And I think he needs like a little steady income. So he's trying to get picked up by Fox. That's my theory.
Okay. Yeah. It's been done.
Yeah. Right. Which reminds me of the AP story yesterday about the both sides of January 6th. What insurrection? Two interpretations.
Yes, right.
I don't know if you
love
saw
that. I did. I've applied my own analysis to it. Of course, I do think maybe that feces smearing was misunderstood, and we don't really know what the intention was or what he was trying to say. And there's two sides to it. I think maybe there was no toilet paper. I don't know. We don't know what the real issue was. Yeah, the two sides, right? And of course, everybody immediately went to town on that, right? Bush and bin Laden, two views of September 11th.
9/11.
Right, sure, yeah. And I mean, it's insane. But do you think that means, is that supposed to mean there's a market for Nate Silver? They do have people that they say are House liberals or something like that. But
he's not, he gave up the liberal label. So
but
he can't really play that anymore. Not that he really ever wore it, but he sort of was centrist Obama type liberal.
There's a real
liberal
chance
Democrat.
that Fox thinks they can.
But
cash
now
in
he's
on
just
that.
he loves COVID. He hates the vaccine. He said scientists lied to us. He's probably very upset about the hydroxychloroquine result.
Why couldn't I be killed by that? Why?
But I don't think, I know he's always had a kind of a dumb streak in him, but I think this is much more calculated than that. I really do think he's trying to become, like Turley did in a way. But
sure.
Silver actually was smarter at some point in his past. Turley's always been disgraceful. And I had told people, you know what, you should have known this when he was for Bill Clinton being impeached, but then he was against Donald Trump being impeached. I don't think you needed to go much further than that.
Right. Well, that should have been a tip-off, certainly.
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And now he's for Biden being impeached, so it's kind of funny.
Well, I got used to impeachment. The first one got me over the hump, and now now I think every president should be impeached.
Every Democrat should be impeached. Oh, God. So, yeah, but that's a funny thing. And it does. The thing you were talking about, though, before about how the media, nothing breaking, no breaking news in the emolument story with this $8 million is, okay, you know what? Think about what you're saying about yourself as a media. That it's got a lot of attention now. Wow, this is big. And said, no, it's not really. Everybody knew this already. Well, maybe you didn't cover it that well the first time.
Yeah. I mean, the issue I'm sure they would have said even then was, well, okay, that Democrats are leveling this charge, and now we will take it to court, I guess, and then we'll cover the court case. And look at that, there's no court case anymore. Well, I guess there was never an issue.
The courthouse news. Yeah, we'd have no news for you in the courthouse on this. This is true.
I looked inside, and there was nobody.
There was plenty of news that no one was covering at the time, and everybody goes, "Oh, do you have standing?" Well, I don't know. Let's take 8 months to decide a motion to dismiss. Oh, well, now it goes to the appellate court. Oh, let's take 2 years there. Oh, okay, you're right. You do have standing. Let's send it back down. Oh, okay. Well, now 4 years are up. Oh, I guess the case is moot.
Yep. I don't know. The litany of excuses, that's another thing that's been, on your list the whole time, and we've discussed since forever. But I'm thinking now about the number of, I guess the legal terms of art and such that have been introduced to the American public over the last 4 years as reasons for not doing anything in particular about an insurrectionist, right? Well, you don't have standing. You don't have standing. You don't have standing. You don't have standing. Congress has no standing. Individuals have no standing. States have no standing. Standing. Always coming up. Let the voters decide. That's
a political question.
Yeah, right. Political questions, standing. Let the voters decide. Well, we need to have due process. There needs to be a conviction, and then, of course, now people also learning. Well, okay, now there's criminal cases, which you say was necessary, are now in progress. I have absolute presidential immunity forever, even when I'm not in office. And people now learning forced to learn the difference between motions in limine and interlocutory appeals. Yeah. And 6 years added on to the case here while we decide whether or not there's such a thing as I'm rubber and you're glue. And that's in the Constitution. The total immunity.
Wow. It's funny you talk about that
running list,
the immunity argument that has stayed the criminal case on January 6th, which at least as of today is still scheduled to start March 5th. But obviously that's not going to happen because even if everything happens quickly, they're going to pull back the time and it'll be April at the earliest, most likely May. But fine, it'll be May unless Cannon says, no, I'm holding my trial in May. You can't do that while she delays her trial. Unbelievable. Yeah. But the good news on that, though, is the D.C. Circuit. Look, I mean, this is the one wild card that I don't know if people have thought about as much as I have, which is, okay, they're going to have the argument next Tuesday. Today's the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Yes, next Tuesday they have the oral argument. And I'm pretty sure this panel knows how they're going to decide. And I'm actually somebody who says, well, look, I don't see how Trump can win in the D.C. Circuit because there was a different case that was decided called Blasingame, which was these I don't know if they were police officers, were people that sued Trump in his personal capacity for what happened on January 6th.
Okay.
Right? And he said, no, I'm immune from that. And there he actually has a case that he could cite, which is called Fitzgerald v. Nixon, which you probably know all about and discuss on your show. Okay. But that case in 1982 decided that Richard Nixon was immune from civil suit for a guy who got fired from the Air Force or something because he said it was retaliatory. Who knows? And the point being that they said, look, you can't have a president worried about whether, how he's going to, his personnel in office. So we're going to create this immunity, civil immunity, so presidents don't get bogged down and worrying about whether they're going to get sued or not. I think it's a wrong decision. And, later on in Clinton v. Jones, the Supreme Court decided, no, it's okay if you sue presidents, it turns out.
Yeah, sure. That kind of suit. The ones we like.
So I don't understand which is which, but fine. But anyway, so Fitzgerald. But they said that even that recognized immunity for presidents doesn't apply to January 6th. That is the immunity that Trump would want to have extended to him for criminal cases doesn't apply in the civil setting. Okay. And that case says, listen, even in that Fitzgerald case, they said, listen, this has nothing to do with criminal immunity. We are not saying a president is immune from criminal prosecution. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying for civil, and these are the reasons.
Right.
All right. So it just stands to reason that whether there is criminal immunity, which there shouldn't be, but suppose there is something in the outer perimeters, it's not going to be more immunity than what you get from the Fitzgerald case, because the Fitzgerald court said, no, we're not even saying this applies to it. That's not what we're talking about here. Yeah. So there's just no way he wins it. You apply Blasingame to the same facts at issue, which they are the absolute, even less of them. Even more facts in the criminal case than that one, but just the set of facts that are at issue in that civil case in Blasingame are part of the criminal case, So if he's not immune under the civil immunity standard, Trump needs them to recognize criminal immunity, and even if they recognize it, they'd have to say, hey, and it's absolute no matter what. Just because you were president, you can't be criminally charged for anything ever. And they can't say that.
You would hope not, right? I mean, as people pointed out right away.
I know they can't say that because the impeachment judgment clause says you can't say that. It says
true. It does.
It says literally, this is what Congress can do. They can remove you from office and disqualify you from holding any office. That's all they can do. But anybody impeached is still subject to criminal prosecution.
Right. It does say that explicitly.
It says it explicitly, so it can't be that.
Yeah.
It can't be that. It just can't. I mean, there's just no way.
Unless the Constitution is unconstitutional. We always go back to that. Well, maybe this Constitution isn't that constitutional.
Well, you know what Trump argument is. Hey, I got to quit it.
Yes.
So if you try me again, it's
double
jeopardy.
Yes. I also enjoyed the new variant of that, which is, well, if they failed to convict me, that means I'm not guilty criminally, period. I can't even, not only, it's double jeopardy, certainly to charge me again, but what would you charge me with? I've already been, this is not a crime. They've said so. No, they haven't. They've said that they're not going to impeach you. Right.
And indeed, what they argued, there was two arguments. I don't know if you remember because we talked about it a lot at the time. There were two arguments that were made at the time. One, well, he's out of office now.
Yes, right.
So you can't go forward with this impeachment trial.
But we've now settled that, thankfully.
Well, I mean, they're saying,
we did.
Well, that's wrong. Then a whole bunch
they say
of Republicans they'll still say no. And that was his big argument.
Right.
So
they still think they're right, but we did impeach him.
Well, you can't impeach me. Well, then that's not a trial.
Oh.
And it didn't happen. They said, I didn't consider whether he was guilty or not.
That'd be interesting.
On the technicality,
okay.
I couldn't remove him from office because he's no longer in office. But wait a second. There's a second punishment you could do. Disqualification.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
We'll take care of that one later. No, we won't. Yeah, right. I mean, that's a good point.
And in fact, there's
certainly true.
Bruce Castor, who was Trump's attorney in the impeachment, said exactly that. He said, listen, don't worry about that. You can get him criminally.
Yeah. That's why,
there's a doctrine in law. I'll give you some more legal mumbo jumbo called judicial estoppel. That is, if you successfully argue a point in one forum, you're barred from taking an inconsistent position in a different forum. So if I win on my argument that you should not remove me because I can be prosecuted criminally, and they said, hey, you know what? That's very convincing. Let's leave it to the criminal process. Then you can't go to the criminal process and say, wait a second, they acquitted me. So in the court of law, you would be barred from making that argument.
Okay.
That Trump is doing. So if we're going to treat
which differs from
the
pleadings in the
as if it was a judicial forum, which is what he wants to argue, well then I would argue, well, you can't make this argument now.
Yeah.
You're barred.
That would be interesting. It would be particularly interesting considering that presumably you end up arguing this in front of the Supreme Court, which means you're also in front of the guy who presided over that trial in the Senate. We made these motions to you.
That's right. We made these arguments to you. We didn't. I don't know if they made a formal motion, but they might have made a formal. You know what? They might have made a motion.
Maybe. I don't know.
And I don't think he decided anything. He was just a potted plant, which was his plan. But it's just complete absurdity. But to go back to my point, I think the D.C. Circuit is bound to reject this. I don't think there's any way they could. And I think they're going to do it quickly, except for one thing. This is the one variable that I'm worried about.
All right.
The panel includes Judge Henderson, who, while she was appointed by, I think it was Bush. Mm-hmm. Was it not Bush? I think it was the first Bush, but I could be wrong. But she's a wacko now. She's like Trumpier than the Trump judges.
Yikes.
So if she knows she's going to lose, but you know how she can delay? She says, wait, don't issue the opinion yet. I'm still working on my dissent, and spent 2 months working on her dissent.
Oh, I guess, yeah, all right, sure. That's available
I'm telling
to you.
you, people don't think about these things. These judges don't like to step on each other's toes. So, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little worried about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a good prediction and something we got to hold out there.
But, if the panel is willing to piss her off, they could say, look, fine, we'll hold the opinions, but we're going to issue the order now.
Oh.
It says we are denying the opinions to come, mandate issued, go back to the district court. And you can read our opinions when Judge Henderson is finished with hers.
Yeah, I guess that's possible, right? Like calling any race. Well, I've seen enough results. There's 3 judges on this panel. Two have voted to impose this order. One says she's not finished writing her reason why she doesn't want to impose this order. You'll get it. I'll mail it to you. But the order is
right. That you lose Donald Trump, and here's this mandate issue.
No reason why I can't do that.
Well, I again, maybe I'm just paranoid, but I'm a little worried about her deciding she's going to take 2 months to write her dissent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right. Well, that's good issue spotting there.
Right. So we'll see how that goes. But let's suppose I'm wrong and she's normal and issues her dissent, within a week. So they argued next Tuesday, and the next Tuesday after that, the issue is the issue. The opinion and order is the issue.
Okay.
And then by the normal rules, because it's a case that involves the United States, either party has 60 days to seek cert.
Okay.
60 days. Now, that normally would not help them if the D.C. Circuit issues the mandate back to the trial court. The trial court can start up again, and if he takes 60 days, he takes 60 days. Then he issues his, if Trump decides, then there's nothing to wait for. So he'd have to make what's called a motion for stay, and he couldn't wait. So he files a cert petition. He makes a motion to stay the case below. I think he would have to do that. That's my view.
From the D.C. Circuit.
From the D.C. Circuit.
Yes.
And then the Supreme Court's got to decide if they issue a stay.
Yes. No motion for rehearing en banc or anything?
Yeah,
like that?
but you know what? That'll get knocked out. And there's enough.
Yeah, okay.
That would take a day. 2 days. They're not.
How can we decide whether to rehear it when we haven't got Judge Henderson's dissent?
Yet. Yeah, but assuming we did and all that, but even that, the rehearing. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you just saw the E.G. Carroll case. The Second Circuit panel
saw the news.
Had a decision like last week, and just yesterday it took like 7-8 days, and that's not even, the urgency. Mm-hmm. They said no to the en banc petition. Okay. So, I mean, now he's got 30 days to ask the Supreme Court to take cert. But his trial in that second E.G. Carroll case starts the 15th. All right. So if he wants to stop the trial, again, he'll have to go and ask the Supreme Court to issue a stay of the case below. Mm-hmm. And I personally don't think they're even going to take the case, much less stay it. What do they care if Donald Trump's got to pay another $5 million? Okay. And the reality is he shouldn't even ask them, because he's going to ask them a lot of favors, and the ones that matter are the ones where he's going to go to jail. Right. So I would think that maybe he just takes his lumps on that, but you never know.
They force him to and say, we're only going to do you so many favors.
Well, what's her name? Alina Habba said that Kavanaugh owes him. Yeah,
right. Well, I mean, so when do you want the chit? On the Carroll case or on the insurrection case?
I'm assuming the case that his immunity argument is just so bad that it's really completely improbable that he'll get 5 votes. But I will say it would not shock me if Alito and Thomas and maybe even Gorsuch vote for it, but I don't think the others are going to. I mean, Alito and Thomas are just, they have given up any pretense of being anything but hacks, in my opinion. Gorsuch might not, so it might be 7-2. It really should be 9-0, and if they were smart, that's what they would do.
Would want that.
They would help them. Their reputationally,
just lighten your caseload,
and it wouldn't change the outcome.
Yeah,
it wouldn't change the outcome because it's 7-2-9-0. It makes no difference to Donald Trump,
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, with the exception of now, you will now at 9-0, you'll now understand why we are rejecting your petitions out of hand and immediately. No one wants to hear you here.
All right. So what can they do for him, though? They can take their time.
Yeah.
Like, what will happen is there'll be a mandate, but the problem that the Supreme Court would have to do to really help him is issue a stay. And that takes 5 votes. And I don't know if they have 5 votes to stay the trial below. I mean, that, to me, will be the most interesting question of all. Because if there is, well, then we should definitely get our pitchforks out at the Supreme Court because that's egregious. There's just no good reason to do that. You want to do it expeditiously, whatever. There's still no trial date. There's a trial date, but we're not having the trial date. Decide before March 5th.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let it go forward.
So that would be necessary.
And the issue isn't complicated. It's been briefed to hell. There's nothing much to think about. Anyway, I hear the music.
Yes, right.
Anyway,
we got to wrap up.
Do it again.
Yeah, we should absolutely do it again. I'm sure everyone was thrilled to hear from you. I certainly was, and it made for a great conversation especially for a Friday. It's nice to just sort of free form it like this, and all of these things. A good prediction, good things to watch out for. And by the way, speaking of moving the trial back or whatever, I also noticed, did you see this thing yesterday? The Trump team is now objecting to Jack Smith's actually trying to keep things moving by producing discovery. Here's some things for you
to give me documents.
Right, and meeting deadlines ahead of deadline, making filings ahead of deadlines, just so that everything is timely, and if everything resolves itself, we can move ahead as expeditiously as possible, even if it's not March. And they want him now, not only do they object to it, asking that he be held in contempt of court for doing it. That should be really interesting.
It's
they'll try anything.
I doubt she'll do anything except say motion denied.
I would hope so. All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
All right, this is fun. I'll definitely call you again.
Terrific. Have a good weekend. Think about how much you want to do it some more, and then do it again in the future. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, time to hand things over now. As you know, Justice Putnam coming up next.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
Let's see what he's got on tap. Well, you might guess of all the things that he's got from around the country and around the world. More about Epstein. Only one anti-Epstein candidate, and it isn't Trump or RFK Jr. So stay tuned to find out who it is. That's a big mystery for me. That and the usual collection of stories from around the country and around the world next, and we will see you next week. Thanks again to Armando.